Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. In his posts, posts an interesting question. This is the choice that many Zimbabweans out there think is before them. Which of the two leaders would you choose? He asked. This is a false choice. We all know who Mnangagwa is. A murderous, corrupt, and murderous tyrant. Here is Mnangagwa doing what Mnangagwa does best: threaten people.
I'm fully aware that certain unruly elements, in collaboration with our detractors, have activated their perennial tendencies of seeking to disturb our security, peace, and prevailing tranquility environment in our country. They must be warned that my government will not broker any form of mischief under whatever pretext. The law will take its course without fear or favor. Atidi mhesva mukono todzisvasvanga.
Here is the man who has ruled Zimbabwe with an iron fist. He was Mugabe's right-hand man until the military coup of 2017, when he took over. He then promised to hold free, fair, and credible elections, but we all know that was a lie. He never intended to hold free, fair, and credible elections. He rigged the elections. Here is Mnangagwa again talking on the issue of elections.
Vana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vako vachikurumbidzwa nekuchikanganisa, ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa, farai. You are doing correct things for your country. Hongu takaita maelections edu, kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anafamba zvakanaka, ndezvavo.
This is the nightmare the people of Zimbabwe are facing. Of a corrupt, incompetent, and murderous tyrant has managed to stay in power because he rigs elections. So if the people, and I think he admired when he posted that, he is assuming that the people have a free and meaningful vote. Who would they choose? But let's also examine the other alternative, Chamisa. I've said on this platform, and I'll say it again, the people of Zimbabwe have risked everything to elect MDC CCC leaders into the opposition these last 25 years. including the 5 years in the GNU. And yet, and they were elected for one specific purpose, to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Let's be very clear on that point. And the party itself, when it was launched in 1999, it was the movement for democratic change. They were promising the democratic changes that the country was dying for. Now, 25 years down the line, including the 5 years in the GNU, we cannot avoid asking the question, what democratic changes did the MDC produce? The answer is none. They had the golden opportunity to implement the reforms during the GNU of 2008 to 2018. They failed to implement even one reform. Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office. And the rest, as they say, is history. Here is Chamisa. He conned the people to participate. In fact, since the GNU, they've been conning people to participate in these flawed elections on the promise that the opposition has devised ways of winning rigged elections. In 2023, his number one campaign message to the people was that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Triple C was going to win big. Here he is making that outrageous claim.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifo iri. Plan ya Mwari haifo iri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
Well, the truth of the matter is, he was lying. He claimed they had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. It was a lie, an idiotic lie for that matter. Because he had failed to even make sure that the country had a verified voters' roll. And yet, organizations like Team Pachedu had just shown that Zimbabwe's voters' roll was in shambles. Anyone who has followed elections will tell you you cannot have a meaningful election without something as basic as a verified voters' roll. Chamisa failed to deploy election agents at all the polling stations. Another simple thing that he could have done. And he had got the funding for it. He pocketed the money, according to some of his own members. So he knew Zanu PF was rigging the elections. And he knew that by participating in these flawed elections, the people will be giving Zanu PF legitimacy. So we come back to the original question again. How can that individual be considered a realistic choice, alternative? And yet, this is the reality that the people of Zimbabwe are presented with. And for many people, they believe that is the choice. And this lies at the heart of the argument. They are failing to realize that Zimbabwe is stuck with this failed political system that has produced corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless leaders. And what the people are failing to realize is that there can be other leaders. Change the system, and you will get competent leaders. That, my friend, is thinking outside the box. And that is, I think, one of the main reasons why the people of Zimbabwe are stuck. We have failed to think outside the box. Here is somebody explaining what thinking outside the box is all about. They explain it a lot better than I could possibly explain it.
We're trapped in our own patterns. And we are our own worst enemy. Yesterday's presumptions shape your attitudes today and tomorrow. And that itself limits you. So it was Einstein that said that you cannot solve a problem with the same thought process that was part of creating the problem. Or sometimes there's another variation of it, that if you want to change the system, you have to have a solution from outside the system, because anything within the system is part of the system. Number one, you don't even know if it's changed, maybe just another another product of the old system, or or maybe a delusion of real change when you're just deceiving yourself into change. So these principles, which are basic common sense, of course, lend itself to the whole concept of what means thinking out of the box. Is it even possible? If we're defined by a box, and we all have prejudices, just to quote another Einstein quote, that by the time, what he says, common sense are the prejudices that we have developed by the time we're 18 years old. That's what's called common sense, which we so are proud of our common sense. Common sense means it's common, means that it's something that everybody agrees about. Now, that may be very nice for popularity and for not making any waves, but it's not necessarily great for innovation, common sense. So when you take all that into account, you start wondering and asking the question, how can we even think out of the box? It's a nice statement. Taco Bell made it into think out of the bun. So it's a great advertising ploy, and it's a great thing to engage people. Okay, sign up for a seminar, we'll teach you how to think out of the box. How many people really think out of the box? In addition, one has to also add into the equation, first you have to have a box to think out of the box. What is your box? If you don't even know what it is, and you don't know its so-called limitations, what does out of the box mean? And then finally, as I said, there's also the subjective and blind spots that come from our prejudices and our biases and our self-interest and so on. So it's not just a simple matter, and therefore it's quite simple. What definitely is obvious, why nonconformity and true pioneering ideas don't happen every second, and not everyone is capable of doing. Einstein, what he came up with is once in history.
Well, I think we can go on on that along those lines. But for the people of Zimbabwe, we cannot say that thinking out of the box is such a tough. You need to be a rocket scientist. When it comes to Zanu PF, Zanu PF has rigged elections for the last 45 years to keep believing that Zanu PF can somehow provide the solution to our problem is naive, to say the least. And yet, that is exactly what people did in 2017 following the military coup. People thought they were given a choice of Mnangagwa or Mugabe. And they went for Mnangagwa. In this case here, we have already established that in 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU, the MDC CCC leaders have failed to implement even one token reform. And since the GNU, they've been participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy, perpetuate the people's suffering out of greed. How can they be the solution to the country's problems? Of course not, they cannot be. What we need is to change the system. I think there is a way to change the system. At the present moment, as much as Mnangagwa can be bombastic and claim that he has got power and so forth, he still needs to go through election processes. And there's nothing that frightens Zanu PF than elections. At the present moment, Mnangagwa is not worried. He knows that the opposition will participate in 2028 as they've done in 2023, and 2018, and 2013. And as long as they keep on participating, they will give the regime legitimacy. This is where we come in, you and me, the ordinary people. We know the system has failed. We know Chamisa has conned people to participate in these flawed elections only to give Zanu PF legitimacy. Zanu PF itself has benefited from it in the sense that they've stayed in power. Chamisa and company have benefited from it in the sense that they have had the few Gravitran seats as their reward. It's us, the ordinary Zimbabweans, who have not benefited from this system. The system has let us, the ordinary Zimbabweans, down. Why do we keep on participating in a system that we know is flawed, that we know has got the results predetermined, and that we also know that if we participate, we give the system legitimacy? We need to think outside the box. We need to realize that we need to change the system and not we have the fixation that the choices of the leaders that are there now is the only choice. There is no choice. It's because the system, this is the best that the system can produce. As long as we have got a system that is corrupt and undemocratic, we will always have corrupt leaders coming from it. Zimbabwe's political system has become a sewage pond. You cannot expect to catch quality fish from a sewage pond. If you want quality fish, you've got to drain the sewage pond and fill it with clean water. That is thinking outside the box. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.